You know what we're here for, okay? These young blokes, these kurungas, right? And we're going to show them how to dance. What I've taught you, now you blokes have got to teach these young blokes. And we're going to do the spirit dance first, all right? And you're in control. Paint up quick. Just give them a slap job. That's all right. Okay. This is the place where we come, you know, where we've been with you blokes, teaching yous. So now it's your turn to teach them all these dances, because this is where they go from being boys to Maaman, men. So you'll know the difference, and you'll feel the difference, and you'll be treated different. You'll be allowed to come hunting. You'll be able to come with the men all the time. Because after we do these dances, that's when you'll be men, used to. And you'll be like your older family, because they know. They've been taught. Now they teach you. That's the way it goes. Maaman, Maaman, Murich. All right, now you young blokes, you know a little bit about this dance. Now you know the reason why we do that dance? All right. That's because when our mob goes to sleep, the good spirits come out to protect the tribe. They come out to protect the tribe from the evil spirits, so they don't get sick. And we're there dancing for them good spirits to come and protect the tribe for when they sleep. So you young blokes, you know what these boys are teaching you, the older ones. That's the reason why we do that dance, okay? To look after the tribe nighttime, and that's the spirit dance. So you've got to pass that on to them. We can feel it in court. We can feel it. And as Uncle said, the spirits are happy, all the old fellows. Because this is where they came to become men. And only men here. Down that way down there, that's where all the Nyoongas are. That's their spot down there. This is our spot, okay? It's our spot. Maaman spot. That's it, you know now.
Maaman!
Hey!
One.
It was something that we needed to do to come here to this place and to bring the young men as well, to bring them here and let them know about this place. Our mob been coming here for thousands of years. The Maaman, us men,
Kaya.
the Yarab. Biyara Maaman, man of the river. Fresh water, salt water, both. Kaya. Kaya.
Back in 2003, there was a call out to anybody who sang in choirs to be part of a huge massed choir for the Perth International Arts Festival, and we learnt 4 songs, and one of them was a song in Noongar. This was just a brand new thought that anybody would sing in Noongar and that Noongars would share their language, and I was very excited to be part of that. So when it came to the idea for an Aboriginal choir, I thought, I wonder, I don't know, I think I had Della's number.
Joe Randell rang me one day. I didn't know who this lady was, this Wadjala lady, and asked if I was interested in putting a choir together, an Aboriginal choir, a community choir with her, and I thought that was a great idea. And so we organised our first rehearsal, and big mob of people came, and I think majority of the people were Wadjala, were non-Indigenous. But anyway, the next day Joe rang me and said, what do you think about all the Wadjalas coming to rehearsal? She said, I was expecting more Aboriginal people to be there. And she said, well, are you okay with that? And I said, look, I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. Let's go with it. They came. They obviously were interested in this idea and in this project and the idea of singing Aboriginal songs and songs in language. So I just said, let's just go with it. And it's kind of been a blessing in disguise, I guess, because there's a bunch of Wadjalas learning and singing Aboriginal songs, and it's been a great journey. It's been very healing, and the 3 months project turned into 11 years.
Early on in the history of the choir, there were a few comments from Aboriginal people who are clearly still carrying a lot of hurt and anger about past injustice, and quite rightly so. And that's very challenging. If people say to you, how come you're singing my language and your people flogged us for singing that language, that's you're ready to just drop the whole thing. I mean, what the hell are we doing here if it's not for the good? Then that kind of challenging discussion is so often countered by Noongars saying, keep doing what you're doing, it's wonderful.
It's a fantastic way of Indigenous, non-Indigenous and other nationalities coming together and learning our culture and history through beautiful song and harmonies. We all cry and laugh and we carry on, and we're here to sing songs in harmony. And it's a lovely, safe environment where people come and they learn the history and our culture, and then they take it away and they teach their families and friends what they've learnt.
You always look down when you're walking in the bush because you don't know where snakes are, especially that summertime. But this is that's a little girigi, the Zamia palm, and that's another important plant. And there's some around here that you get the female with new growth, very important plant that. And over here we come across the berry bush or the snake bush, and people don't necessarily pick it from the bush itself because it's better to wait for it down on the ground, and that's when we know that bush, the fruit from there can be edible. So just look down here, there's a few that's on the ground, so if I give you that one, that's a nice little feed. It's sweet, and they call it the snake bush because the snake could be under there, or the bobtail. They like to eat them, and it's readily accessible, and people can just enjoy that nice sweet taste. The texture is similar to a mango, so when you're eating it, it's like right now we're having morning tea. We've got this whole this platter of different bush foods out here at the moment. Again, the snake bush. Be very careful. I don't know about squatting down in these sort of places. You always have a look first for the snake or the bobtail. So I love those. Very nice.
Aboriginal art to me, or just being an artist in general, came for me from a really bad time where I pretty much went through a nervous breakdown, and art traditionally is a form of healing, emotional healing, and that's the reason why I started painting. Was I just needed a hobby, I needed something to do, and I found it was really calming, really helped at the time, and things progressed, and now it got to a point where I really love what I do, and I found I was actually quite good at it as well, so I decided that, well, I should be an artist, and that's why I decided to enroll in university and do a Bachelor of Arts. So with my art practice, I use DSLR cameras and I use a drone as well. And for me, we have this modern technology, so why not embrace using it? I mean, I like to send the drone up and get a really good view from the air, because while I know what it would look like from the air composition-wise, the colours and the way that the rain has shaped the earth will change from week to week. So I can go back to the same place throughout the year and probably end up with 10, 15 different paintings that look completely different with the same composition. And they're all correct, because at that time, that's what the land looked like. And you're only going to get that if you send something up in the air and take photos. So with my artwork, there has been some sort of criticism with it's not a traditional Dreamtime story, so therefore it's not Aboriginal art, or because I have used dots, it's not proper Aboriginal art because in their mind apparently Noongahs didn't use dots. But from my experience there was dots in the caves and things, so we can use them in a highlighted way. Some in different areas, it's different where they go. The one thing people forget though, that being a Noongar man or an Aboriginal man, no matter what I paint, no matter what I do, it's going to be Noongar Aboriginal art, because I am an Aboriginal Noongar man. So no matter what I do, I can't get away from that. Talking to the older people and learning and listening to them about the old stories about our ancestors and everything, it's really good. It gives you a sort of different perspective about how we live now. So even now, like when I feel that things are a bit like the world's against you, or you're not getting a fair shake or something like that, I look back to these sort of stories of the old people and just think, well, I've got it so easy compared to them. What are you complaining about? Like, they would have loved to have had our opportunity, and I use those old stories to sort of, you hear about the strength of our old people and just being able to beat the odds, and I use that to motivate myself nowadays and to rise above any of the rubbish that gets thrown at me from society, from people. Not just only having a strong sense of identity, but also hearing about the strength and how we should really, you sort of learn how to conduct ourselves nowadays and to rise above anything that could have a real negative effect. Also with art, it did bring me a lot closer to my culture as a Balladon Noongar man. It's making me go out to all the different areas in the Noongar country in the whole southwest of Western Australia with my camera, with my drone. Makes me talk to a lot of the local elders, and I am learning so much more about culture and traditional medicines and bush foods and different significant areas. Going out and actually being able to see the whole Noongar country from very different perspectives. Even farmers that allow me on their property to go and take photos and things like that, areas that you can't normally get to as well. It gives me a much stronger sense of identity, knowing the country from which we come from and just having a much closer sort of relationship with the land from where the family come from as well, which is a really fantastic thing.
And here's the marri tree, the bourne, the tree, the marri, name of this particular tree. And if you look here, you can see some of the resin there, the kino, the sap, and you take a little bit of that, about the size of, if I can just grab some off there, that bit there is good enough. This tree is antibacterial, so if we've got a bacterial infection through flu, chest infection, the antibacterial medicine is good for the bacterial infection itself. So that's why we call this obviously the medicine tree. It helps with bacterial on the inside we ingest, or it can also be like a saline wash on the outside. So if we get a cut or something like that, it helps. And not many medicines are like that you can have, that's both or topical as well as ingesting. So that's really nice. A good old marri tree. This one's a bit battered. I don't know whether storm conditions or a bit of a lightning strike or something, but it reveals itself through, some more up there. And people walking, our ancestors walking along the tracks and that, would have just picked a little bit off, and it would have been part of a healthy regime, living, a healthy lifestyle, healthy foods, the unrefined foods obviously, and having access to everything around us that made life really straightforward. So that was nice. And down here, if I can look at this, it's a big blob of it. So these days, that big blob, we can take that home with us and have that little bit, like a sunflower seed size, and keep it in a cup. And when it hardens, we can use it at home as well. So that's magic stuff.
There's times when I just sit and reflect, like a moment like now, and I just think to myself, how lucky am I to live in a place like this? And it's not just to see it aesthetically, it's to see it and to feel it. And to feel a place like this, combined with seeing its beauty, just takes you to another level. When you have the opportunity to be in a place like this, smell it as well as see it and feel it, then that takes you into a completely different plane, and it's awesome to be part of it and know it so intimately. And to be able to achieve that, you've got to be connected to thousands and thousands of years of this place. And that's done through story, song, dance and art. They're the four main ingredients. And on every full moon, there would be dancing and singing, and the whole groups would be involved. And we call it Puntabin, the place of plenty. And to have a body of water like this running right through the middle of it, wow. So you have that 6-season cycle. You also have the social order, where you learn that before you can get married, you'll learn about your totemic system that goes way back, and then you'll learn about the marriage law. So you're born under Wardong the Crow or Manach the White Cockatoo. If it's Wardong the Crow, you'll be Naganak or Ballarat people, and they can never ever marry one another. First law, if it's under Manach the White Cockatoo, you'll be Taunderup people or Didarup people, and they can never ever marry one another. And that was designed specifically to keep the gene pool apart. Our people never referred to it as a gene pool, but it was fastidiously maintained by our women. And they were the ones that knew what would happen if you married too close. And each family will have their own totem. For me, it's the pelican on my mother's side. And every time I see that pelican, I see my mother. But I don't just see the pelican and my mum. I hear all the stories that she shared and all the stories I could find out about this part of the world. And down here we call a pelican Budalung. Budalung. In her home country, up in the Pilbara, she would call it Jitarara. Beautiful bird. And they're a migratory bird. They leave here in the middle of what we call March every year as a month, in huge numbers, circling together, gaining height, and then they'll just go to the north. I've seen flocks of 300 migrating through at that time of the year. They have their set pattern, they'll land somewhere, stay overnight, and the next morning early they'll be circling again and on to the next lake. And while they're doing that, they're topping up their food and keeping themselves maintained for the long journeys. And they'll time that with the cyclone season in the north, and then spread themselves down along the rivers where the pools are full of all little fish that are breeding, and that'll be the food for their young. And my mother was brought down from the Pilbara, and she always said to us, the pelican goes up there and has its little ones and raises them. And she said, I did it the opposite. I came down here and had my little ones and raised them. And both Mum and Dad were taken away as children. And while that's a story all by itself, it's not one that we can afford to get bogged down in and feel sad and all of that. But we can't forget it. But we also have to stay so that we can share stories with other people as well, and not surrender to hurt and angst and frustrations. So coming to a place like this, to be able to see it, to be able to feel it, to be able to smell it, that's when we're in a place where you know that your ancestral lineage is. And obviously for here, it's on my dad's side. But to see pelicans fly in here, that automatically connects me to home on my mum's side, up around Iramagadoo. And she taught us that we are children from that country and we have the right to paint it with that beautiful language like water running over stone. And I thank her every day for what she did for us, as I remember her and her beautiful hugs. That's what life's about. And to be able to see a pelican and then see my mother, who left us physically in 1995, a long, long time ago, is difficult to explain to people. Really difficult to explain, because she's never further away than that pelican. It's a beautiful thing, absolutely beautiful. So that even strengthens your connection to a piece of country even more.
In my time, since I've lived, I can look at the Noongar families, and when we were kids there were big families. I think my grandmother had about 13 kids. She reared 3 or 4 grandkids up on top of that. And most of the families were large families, 10, 12 kids or more. And we all lived close together.
just about every weekend. We knew my uncles, we knew all our aunties, we knew all that. But over the years, the families have slowly drifted away from each other through work reasons, and others coming into the family, in-laws are moving in different directions. So we've seen the big Noongar families slowly get smaller and smaller and away from what we grew up with. And so my idea was always to have the family close together, and we've always tried to do that.
I was the only child to my mother, and because she was a bit of a rambler here, there and everywhere, so she left me with my grandparents. My grandmother, she had about 10 kids, so I sort of fitted in there somewhere, and it was good because I grew up in a happy family. They didn't fight much, didn't drink much.
Merle's pop too was Tommy Kickett, Dooja Kickett. He sort of was in charge of the reserve, so he's a very strong male figure, and he kept a lot of troublemakers off.
So he was the elder, and everybody respected that.
He was the elder, and he had a lot of respect. He was only a little man, but he had a lot of respect.
And that's one thing about families, isn't it?
Yep.
Noongar families.
Yep.
Is they all respect their elders.
Yes.
Yeah. They still have that strong sense of belonging to each other
Yes.
as a family.
And respect, yes.
Respect.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's right, isn't it? Family strong. What makes us strength is to know where they come from, to draw back on that, know where they are now, and their sense of belonging to that group of people, and know which direction they're headed because they've had that leadership.
But if a family is strong, then the younger ones will grow up strong. What is a 28? What is a donut?
What's a 28? A parrot.
Yeah. What is a coolbody?
A coolbody is a magpie.
What's a kaka? It's a kookaburra. What's a yoderer?
Duck. Granddad, over here is the waterfall. Not over there. That's small. Oh my God. Oh look, that's where someone.
Well, when I was growing up, me and my brother were cricket mad, and Dad always used to tell us about our great-grandfather, Charlie Sandstone. And he was a really great cricketer in the country town of Wildcatcham. And growing up, hearing all the stories about all the cricket scores and the runs that he used to make playing in the country cricket weeks. And one of the stories that stood out the most was when he was playing cricket for Wildcatcham and ended up playing for Darren because he couldn't get a spot on the team. And when they come down to Perth to play in the country cricket week, he went out to lunch at the Raffles and he got refused service for being Aboriginal, and the entire cricket team got up and walked out with him. And it just showed the respect that he had from the cricket team. And when I read on in the information, he had a lot of respect in the town, and he worked at the butchers, worked for farmers, and eventually ended up having his own bin run and worked for himself later on in life. And everybody who knew him always said that he was an absolute gentleman, and he was very well respected throughout all the country towns in the area. Just in our personal day-to-day life, when I look back at the way that they were living and what he achieved in those conditions, it makes me think whenever I come across obstacles in my personal life, working career, it gives me the strength to push on, and whenever I get some animosity or anything, I just move forward and just try to walk through it and keep moving forward. Most of the stories that are behind my art reflect a lot of the Noongar history that my grandparents and my great-grandparents went through when the government really controlled what they were allowed to do, and when they were on the reserves and in the missions, and especially with this piece with my great-grandfather Charlie Sandstone and the examples that he set in the community and with cricket and on the team. It really is a pillar of strength in our family, and I really connected with this story when I read it for the first time, and I just had to do an art piece on it. And to get the photo of him in the raffles was just something really important to me, and it was one of the first things that I thought of when I read the story. Was how cool would it be to get my grandpa Charlie back in the raffles for the beer that he'd never got. And it just makes me feel really proud and how much he would really appreciated what we've done. Okay, so here's the finished product. As you see, it's a photo of the raffles and where the event happened with my great grandfather. The dot work on this represents a walk trail that was named in his honour out at Wildcatcham for his cricketing achievements. And just the colours in the dot work represent all the colours that you see out of Wildcatcham, the oranges, the reds and the greens with all the bushland and the foliage and the ground. Traditionally the Noongar art was used in sand drawings and cave paintings to teach the younger generations on how to live traditionally and what to do and what not to do and where to go and where not to go. And that was very important in the storytelling and in the learning of the younger people. Some are still using bark, some are using canvases, boards, people are using surfboards. They're putting art on everything. And what I love about the modern contemporary styles is they're really pushing the boundaries and thinking outside the box, and it's opening up Noongar art to everybody, so everyone can relate to the art piece. It's not something where people need to know traditional culture to be able to read the paintings. Today, with the modern artworks, anybody can understand the artwork, and that's really important, and it breaks down a lot of barriers in a lot of different cultures that come to learn. The Nyungar culture, I see it today, what happened throughout those bad years has really affected the culture and where it is, and that's what I like to document in my artwork. And telling these stories, it really helps the younger generation to realise how to survive in this world that we're living in today. It's all the traditions and the traditional culture still has its place and is good to learn. To know where our family's been and to know how they can address problems and move forward in today's society is probably one of the most important things I think the younger generation really needs to learn. And that's where, with art pieces as artists, it's almost a responsibility doing Noongar art to tell these stories and give our younger generation something to look at and stories to read and to learn from and to use in their own personal life. As a young Noongar artist doing a modern contemporary style, we've had our battles just with the different cultures of the older generation to the younger generation of artists. And the older generation still love to do their more traditional style of artwork, and the modern contemporary artists are really trying to push those boundaries. And there is a little bit of a confliction between the two, and we find not just in the differences in culture, but the whole industry has been controlled to an extent. And as a modern contemporary artist, you're always wanting to push those boundaries and create something completely new and different. And there's always someone there saying, no, you can't do that. No, that's not Aboriginal art. No, this, no, that. And you just got to try and push through that without being disrespectful in your art piece, but still tell those stories you want to tell. A lot of the artists, older artists, love what we're doing. Some don't. Some might think what we're doing is a little bit disrespectful to the Noongar art and our culture. But as part of being a Noongar and teaching you, telling your stories and pushing those boundaries, you're going to expect that from some people, and you just got to try to move on and block out those bad experiences and just try to keep pushing the boundaries and doing as much different sort of art that you can.
Yagan was a real statesman for the Belair people. He was a warrior, very knowledgeable. A lot of people were frightened of him because of his skill. He was a very sharpshooter with his spear throwing. He just worked magic in country. His father was Midgegooroo, who was the leader of the Belair, and this particular group were the first people to suffer the full impact of settlement. And Yagan's mum indeed shouted out that they bring the smell of death, and there was big meetings where clans from across the river, from down as far as Pinjarra, came and met about these big white birds coming in and to talk about what's going on. And Yagan, from what I believe, against the wishes of his family, passed the olive branch, if you like, to try and make friends with these people, because our way is to share and care, and that's why we've been, our people have been here for thousands and thousands of generations. And unfortunately that didn't go so well, because the people that came and settled here just saw opportunities for themselves, and greed set in. And so the fences went up and the cultural collisions began, and then the deaths of our people. And Unfortunately, Yagan was betrayed by young boys that actually he helped, and he was brutalised, and his skull was sent to England to put on show. Before that, his father was arrested and tried and convicted in 20 minutes and shot by a firing squad. The only person in Australia to ever be shot by a firing squad. So the demise of these two brilliant leaders who suffered the full impact really hurt the rest of the community, and then created more angst within our community, our Noongar community. So that was, pretty sad, but those two really tried their best, but greed set in, and the power of those that came here to take this country broke their own laws and just killed the people to get the land.
So I say kaya, wanju wanju, which means hello and welcome. And I can do that as a Noongar Ballarong woman. I say that because there is a difference between doing a welcome to country and doing an acknowledgement to country. So here in York, I can do a welcome because I'm Ballarong and I'm from here. Whereas in Perth, if I was in Perth, I would do a acknowledgement to country because I'm not from the language group of Whadjuk or Swan River people. And it's important to understand the two differences of a welcome and an acknowledgement to country. But I think it's wonderful that I can do a welcome here in my country, Ballarong country. So welcome.
The museum, which had been started in 1972, hadn't had a great deal of interpretation of Ballarong Nyungar cultural heritage, and so when I arrived in the early 2000s, that was something I tried to include.
When you rang me, I must admit I did get very excited. So when the museum was opened in 1972, as kids at the school, we were brought here by our teacher to go through the new museum. And I remember thinking at the time, there's nothing Noongar in here. And I remember asking the teacher, well, where is our history, meaning Noongar history? And I was told to be quiet, and I remember her putting her finger going like this, shh. So when you rang me, I was really excited. And we discussed a panel, and I remember saying to you, we can't just have one panel, we have to have two, because with Noongar people living in York, there was those Noongars who lived in town, but then there were those Noongars who lived on the reserve.
I was very glad that Marion raised that point, that there were multiple sides to any story, and although I was originally seeking just one Noongar woman's story, we very soon decided, yes, there had to be two stories. And so Marion and I started working together to tell the story about life on the reserve.
And it was really important for me to do that from a personal perspective, but I wanted to do it because I wanted the history to be shared, and I was thinking of future generations. I mean, I have one child, but there's a whole lot of other family members from the reserve who had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and I wanted them to know what it was like on the reserve, and for that to be here and shown, and not just for us as Aboriginal people or Noongar people, but also non-Aboriginal people that I grew up with and went to school to hear the story of Noongar people. So it was really, really positive.
Marion was so unselfish and public-spirited in telling her very personal story, which highlights such a lot of social issues of the mid and late 20th century in that panel. It's an enlightenment to all visitors who see it about just exactly what life on the reserve was really like.
And we've even had PhD students studying it because it's one of the very few interpretation pieces in the wheat belt that talk about people's lives in such intimate detail, really.
Yes.
Okay, let's go from the top and get these harmonies happening.
Recently, we've begun to really celebrate where we are all from and how we have mixed heritage and we're all included. But the thing that we share is that we live on Noongar country. And where else in the world do you not speak the local language in order to get around and get on?
You know, so we have a lot of the new people come and they're singing and learning these songs, and you'd be amazed, totally amazed and surprised at how many people don't know. They don't know anything about the 67 referendum or the 1905 Act or the stolen generation or the massacres, and a lot of them themselves, they feel like they've been done the dirty on, and they feel ripped off that they weren't taught this in high school. They feel ripped off that they were told lies or they weren't told the truth by the system or by their parents or by whoever. So still, they come here and a lot of people are still hearing this news for the first time. And it still blows me away. So the importance of getting this into primary schools and high schools, it's just so important that we start teaching our children this history. If all Australians knew our history, the history of Aboriginal Australia, then you'll find that Australia will be a much better place to live in, because everyone will know why our people are the way we are. Yeah, so let's get onto the education department and change up the curriculum.
There's actually an urgent need for children to be taught the wonders of belonging to the earth, and Noongar language is a brilliant way into that.
We've expanded, to much greater things as a choir, and doing various other projects like Koralong, which is where we go into schools and we do workshops with primary school kids and teach them how to sing in Nyungar and learn songs.
A lot of the songs we do teach in schools are to do with belonging, family, country, spirit, being true to yourself, and if we can just only teach these songs to everybody, then we've got this common bond. And never before has Noongar language been so accessible, and have Noongar people been so happy to share, and that's a huge privilege. A huge privilege for us who are grabbing it,
I think generally the community is getting used to the idea of teaching our language and passing it on to non-Indigenous people. Because it's been laying dormant for so many years, it's really important for us to get with the program and make some changes and, teach our young people our language, and we have to keep it alive. And the only way of keeping it alive is to pass it on to our children, and that includes non-Indigenous children. And so I guess what I teach, I give permission to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. I give them permission to teach the language also to whoever wants to learn it. We just need to keep it going and keep it strong.
What we do today does affect who we are later on down the track. Not only does it affect us, it affects the next generations. And there's so many people in the past that have done so much for us so far that it just makes sense that we really should do what's best for our next generations as well. And so I'm doing my best to do my part as well. And I've got the best support network I could have ever hoped for.
There is something really wonderful happening here. There's history in the making again, I guess, and just bringing our language back for me has brought me back around in a full circle as far as my identity and my Aboriginality goes. It makes me a strong person to know my language. So, I mean, singing and teaching language at Madjitil Moorna Choir is a great outlet for me as well. And, you know, those members are going to go away and they're going to teach other people. They're going to pass on what they've learnt, and yes, we'll just keep it strong.